Welcome to Leadership Moments.
In every great leader's life, there are pivotal moments that shape their character, test their resilience, and awaken their vision.
Together, we'll uncover the invaluable lessons hidden within these transformative moments. Today, our guest is Dr. Randy Ross. Dr. Randy is the CEO of Remarkable and a former Chief People Officer. He is a compelling communicator, craftsman of culture, and best-selling author of multiple books, including Fireproof Happiness, Extinguishing Anxiety, and Igniting Hope. Working with multiple brands like Delta Airlines, Darden Restaurants, GE Appliances, McDonald's, Panasonic, Cox Communications, Compass Group, Chick-fil-A, Berkshire Hathaway, and Intercontinental Hotel Group. He has inspired and enabled countless people to find new passion and purpose in their work and work better together in teams and have more significant influence and impact. Today, we will talk about finding the passion within your team and yourself to be a more effective leader while building an engaging environment. Let's jump in. Hi, Dr. Randy. Thank you so much for being a guest on our show today. I am super excited to talk about your experience and some things that you're working on. When we were talking, you have a great story about how you have had to motivate people in different environments. Would you like to go into your story on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Stacy. And first of all, thank you for allowing me to be on your show and be able to speak to your listening audience. As far as my background is concerned, I spent the first part of my career in the not-for-profit space. I had the privilege of being the executive director of a couple of organizations that did great good in the community, and we were rapidly growing, doing some exciting work. But I learned in working in the not-for-profit realm that obviously people who support your cause are doing it voluntarily. They're not doing it because they're being paid, they're volunteers. So the question is, how do you inspire, motivate, rally people to do good? And it all has to do with tapping into people's passion. First of all, they have to feel aligned with the cause or the mission. They have to believe that it's a worthy endeavor, that they're a part of something bigger than themselves, and that they're literally changing the world for good. And so what you have to do is you have to help attach their personal passion to the cause or the mission of the organization. It seems rather simple, but it really has to do with engagement. Well, then when I made the move over into the for-profit realm, what I discovered was that money was not the primary motivator for most people. It wasn't financial remuneration, although it has to be fair pay for fair work, have to be within, obviously, a good range when it comes to specific responsibilities. But the key to tapping into that discretionary effort that lies within the margins of life is not necessarily a pay raise. It has to do with the same exact factors. It has to do with understanding what people are passionate about, what their personal gifts are, and then how they can lean into their passion and leverage their strength to solve problems in an area that they feel passionate about. So that same idea of helping people connect their personal passion to corporate objectives is really the essence of engagement. Because I work around Gallup's research on employee engagement, and you know that only about 30 to 33% of the American workforce is what Gallup would call highly engaged, which means that they have a strong emotional attachment to the work experience. And for me, that's very sad. For organizations, it's a challenge, because what that actually means is that there's so much discretionary effort that people aren't bringing to the work experience because they don't feel impassioned about what they're doing. And I think that the key and the essence to higher productivity and better morale, higher levels of engagement, revolves around that simple idea of tapping into people's passion. There are ways that we can do that as leaders.
You're so right about finding their passion. I've done a lot of work with Gallup as well, and working on teams and getting them engaged. Understanding someone's passion can be a little tricky sometimes. What are some questions that you ask to really learn their passion? And then how do you leverage it as well after that?
Well, obviously, if you've looked at the Gallup research, what we want to do is we want to lean into their strengths. There's a big conversation about strengths in the market, Marcus Buckingham, Gallup, strengths finders, all of that. And then there's a lot to do with passion, as we've been talking about. But here's the key, I think, Stacy, is that the essence of value creation is helping people discover their strengths, tap into their passion, but then show how that can be used to solve a problem. And that's where I think a lot of people miss it. They've heard the phrase, do what you love and you'll never work it another day in your life. Well, that's fine, but that doesn't always work out that way. I mean, I love to play golf. I do. I love the blue sky. I love the green grass. I love the little white ball. And I love getting it out and spending way too much time on the golf course than I should, but I don't play very well. But no one's ever offered to pay me to play. I love it. It's a passion, but nobody's ever. So that's a hobby, right? And so I think we have to help people understand that they need to learn to love what they do, but you can't always only do what you love to do. And so passion is a part of it. Strengths is another part of it. But I think sometimes that's even misguided because, yes, there may be things you do really, really well. But here's the question: what problem are you solving? Because the bigger the problem you solve, the greater value you create, the more invaluable you become. So the key is to find a problem in the world, a problem in the business, a problem in the organization, and then leverage those components to solve that problem. And you asked about the question. Well, I think we do a great disservice to people when we talk about career pathing. This is what we see you should do. This is how you get there. If you take these steps, this is the progression of your career. What I like to do is I like to flip it on its head, and I like to say, hey, what do you love to do? What are your strengths and what problem do you solve? And we go through a process of career crafting. You tell me what you'd like to do, where you'd find fulfillment, what problems you'd like to solve. You tell me where you'd like to be in 5 years, and let me see if I can help facilitate getting you there. And I think that's a far better way for the individual and for the organization, because you unleash untapped potential when you ask that kind of a question. What are you wanting to do? What problems do you want to solve? And where do you want to be?
I love that career crafting. That's a great thought there. All right. So you got people that they might know their passion, you're pulling it out of them. I have a lot of clients that lack the confidence in following their passion. What are some recommendations or things that you have done to help build that confidence where people can follow their passion now that you know what that is?
Ah, great question. And I think that's one of the things that stifles a lot of people is just the fear of the unknown, having enough bravery to step out, the courage. I wrote a book a few years ago called Fireproof Happiness. And it talks about the link between hope and happiness. And it's interesting because everyone would say that hope is absolutely essential to sustain the human spirit. But if you ask them to define hope, a lot of people falter. They don't quite know. It's, kind of fuzzy. It's ethereal, hard to wrap your mind around. But we define hope as a dynamic motivational system tied to inspirational goal setting. And so hope is the idea that there is a path that I'd like to pursue. There is a desired destination that I'd like to reach. And the fun is in being able to craft the journey to get there. And it involves some basic principles like positivity, which is a big part. I believe that my tomorrow can be better. It involves responsibility, which says I'm not a victim of circumstance, but I have a say in how my life unfolds. There's agility, which just simply says that there's not one path to any desired destination. If one path is blocked, you can take another, create, unblock the path, whatever. But agility is a huge part. And then reality, embracing the totality of your reality. Those are all factors that play into this idea of hope. And I think helping people build resilience by understanding and embracing the power of hope is essential to what you're talking about. It's essential to helping them find meaning and fulfillment in the work that they do. And so I think that's a great place to start, is finding hope to build resilience. And then appreciating the fact that happiness and fulfillment is not a result of achieving certain objectives or getting to a desired destination or an end. It's really the fun of the pursuit. It's the fun of the journey. It's feeling like you're making progress. That's where the essence of hope lies.
Yeah. And the journey part is what's most important. And you weave in the resilience there. I always tell people just show up and beautiful things happen. That's always the hardest part, is just showing up. So I love if you have hope, maybe it's a little bit easier to just show up and be able to do that and have that. All right, so I have hope now. I know what my passions are. Some of those decisions can be scary. What are some things that you consider during scary situations to help give you that hope and give you that little bit of oomph to move forward?
For me, kind of is the very foundation of what I think is essential for life, for love, for leadership, and that's creating a movement of good. You and I, in our conversation before, we talked about axiology. Not many people are familiar with axiology, but it's actually a strain of philosophy. And it has a lot of impact in this whole conversation that we're having because axiology goes all the way back to Socrates and Plato, but it is an attempt to define and measure good, which to me is extremely fascinating. And the way it breaks down is that in organizational life, it's about creating movements of good, which is exactly what we're talking about. Individuals being able to participate in something that's larger than self. And so the question becomes, what are you doing to create good in the world? What are you doing to bring additional value? We talk about creating value, adding value, bringing value to any endeavor. And it's all rhetoric because most people don't know how to do that. But axiology for me is the best descriptor of human motivational behavior because what it posits is that people will do what they believe will bring the greatest value to themselves and to those around them. And that just makes common sense. And so that's what I think people will do. So to understand the principles of axiology and how to put them into practice in daily life, I think is what gives you hope. I think it's what establishes a worthy endeavor that goes beyond yourself, that creates a legacy, that gives back, that does good in the world, because that's actually where people find the most fulfillment. Happiness actually comes as a byproduct of doing good for other people. Depression actually is the lack of hope that comes when you feel like your own personal endeavors are being blocked or unfulfilled, which is kind of interesting because usually depression sets into those who are more myopic and self-absorbed and concerned about what's happening in my world. And one of the things we know from psychology is the best way to get out of a depression is to focus on doing something for others, either expressing gratitude for others for things that they've done to help you get to that point in your life and your career. They've impacted you in some positive way, or to actually give back and do for somebody else what they wouldn't be able to do for themselves to make their life better. And when we do that, then everything changes because the focus is really where it should be, and that's creating value in the world around us. And the interesting thing is when we do that, it comes back to us. So for instance, I'm the happiest as a husband when my wife is happy. I'm the happiest as a parent when my kids are happy. I'm the happiest as a team leader when my teams are happy. And so when my focus is on doing good for them and creating value for them, which is where it should be, then everything that I'm looking for comes back to me as a byproduct of those efforts. Because happiness, well, John Templeton said, happiness pursued eludes, but happiness given returns. I very much believe that to be true.
We actually just did an episode a couple weeks ago that was around giving back and paying it forward and how acts of kindness do increase your dopamine and your serotonin levels. So this ties in really nicely and just more proof for people to give and be able to do those acts of kindness. You talked
Right.
about some principles in axiology, and I love the happiness piece. How can someone get started when they start thinking about axiology?
Well, let's talk about some basic premises. That'll be a good place to start.
Right?
Basic premises of axiology, to make them simple. We call them maxims. They're universal truths or axioms that we like to say, if you apply these, it will maximize your performance, it will maximize your efforts. But some maxims of axiology, the first one is the maxim of creativity, which just simply says we are all designed to create value in life. In other words, we feel good when we do good. There's just something about seeing an act of random kindness that warms the heart because we're designed to do good. The problem is that our hard drive, but our software is broken because our software tends to be very selfish and very myopic because it's all about what's in this for me. And so we have to sort of turn that upside down and get back to this idea that fulfillment in life comes from creating value for others. And that's the first question. So the first question is, do you bring more to the table than you take away? Do you create more value than you take? Which is simple, but it's profound, because think about every single relationship. You need to ask yourself at night when you lay your head on the pillow, today, did I bring more value to those around me than I expected from them? And if we're honest, we all have a tendency to want to take more than we give. We want to come out on the upper side of that negotiation or that situation. And the question becomes, did I provide more value for my wife, for my kids, for my colleagues today than I took away? It's a really good, simple question. To give more than you take. That's the first one. The second question is, do you leave a positive wake in the world? Unfortunately, as leaders, sometimes we don't slow down long enough to smell our own exhaust. So as we move through the world, it's like a boat going through the water. We leave a ripple impact on the shore, and sometimes that's not as positive as we would like for it to be. So I think it's a good thing for us to stop and just reflect upon, how am I impacting those people around me? A good way to measure that is to ask a simple question. Many of your listeners may be familiar with the 360-degree evaluation, what I call the poor man's 360. You don't have to go through an extensive process of getting feedback from everybody through some sort of a artificially constructed master list of questions. Just ask one question. Sit down with someone you trust that you know has your best interest at heart and ask this question. What is it like for you to be on the other side of me? How do you experience me? I mean, what do you see in me? How could I be a better leader? How could I be a better spouse? How could I be a better dad? And you'll be amazed once people feel comfortable. Now, the first time you ask that of maybe direct reports, they're going to be a little bit apprehensive, because it's like, is this a trick question? I'm not sure how honest I can be. Will there be punitive measures if I'm really candid? But the more you ask the question, the more you weave that into the fabric of the conversation, and people know you're serious, and then you act on the feedback that you receive. It can be a powerful, powerful tool for self-awareness and for growth, just by asking those close to you, hey, am I leaving a positive wake in your world? Now, you don't have to always take all the feedback at heart. Sometimes you can get heat without a lot of light, but you have to sort that out. But the point is that when we as leaders are open to, not only open to, but we aggressively ask for feedback on a regular basis, it helps us grow. It helps other people feel more connected. They feel like we have a deeper relationship when we're actually having open loops of continuous feedback. Because the best organizations I work with are those that have matured to the point that they do have open loops of feedback where anybody at any time can say anything to anyone about anything and give their insight and their feedback and suggestions for improvement, because those organizations become both self-coaching and self-correcting. And that's when performance is elevated to a whole different level. That's all great stuff. The third question, it gets back to our conversation previously. To sustain value creation, are you leveraging your passion and your strengths to solve problems? Because that's how you continuously create value for people. And that's one of the basic tenets of axiology. And then the fourth one is just simply ownership increases responsibility. The more I take personal ownership of any endeavor and get my fingerprints on it, then the more personal responsibility I'll take to make sure that the outcomes are positive. And I think one of the things that we can work on as leaders is involving people in the process, not just issuing dictates from on high, but actually asking for them to participate in constructing the goals and the objectives, helping get their fingerprints on it so that they can own the process. And so those are some basic elementary ideas from the field of axiology. And in all of our books, we try to unpack different dimensions of axiology to help improve engagement, morale, and performance.
Those are great. Thank you for going over those. As you're going through them, it sounds to me like some of it is similar to servant leadership, just a portion of it. Am I correct in thinking that? Do you see servant leadership as different than these axiology principles?
I think there's a lot of parallel between the two. They're both about creating movements of good. They both incorporate this element of humility, where leaders have a great sense of self-awareness. There's this idea of putting others first and serving others as you do good in the world to leave a legacy. So there's a lot about generosity, legacy, philanthropy that comes through both in servant leadership and in following the principles of axiology. I would say they're actually kissing cousins, very similar in approach and methodology, maybe just different nomenclature to a certain degree. But what's interesting is I found truths that actually are transformative, are also transcendent and eternal in nature. And so, regardless of what name or nomenclature you may use for it, those things that are impactful, there's nothing new under the sun. We may package it and say it in different ways, but I think servant leadership and axiology go hand in hand.
Love that. Next piece I want to talk about is the feedback piece. I
Yeah.
love the question that you have. I think that's very unique. And I agree with you that the best organizations are the ones that can truly build this in successfully, and the self-coaching piece that you added on to that. When we think about feedback, the most important part is how do you receive feedback and how you act on that feedback. What are
Right.
some recommendations that you would give our leaders of how to handle that properly?
We unpack that pretty thoroughly in our book, Relationomics. Actually, part of it's in the book, Remarkable, as well. But Relationomics helps leaders grow to become leaders worth following. In other words, they create a relationally rich environment, a place where people are inspired to bring their best to work every day. And we talk a lot about feedback. And what's interesting is that leaders often are very adept at providing feedback to their direct reports, but they're not always as eager or quick to ask for feedback from their direct reports. And so it's a skill that I think has to be mastered and has to be demonstrated, that we as leaders need to ask for feedback. Then we need to show others how to receive that well, and then how to apply it to create momentum and excitement within the organization. So the first thing we have to do is get accustomed to asking for feedback regularly from all those around us. I call it real-time coaching. I mean, that's what you want, is you want feedback immediately after the activity, so that people will either establish it as a part of their routine, or they will discard it as being non-productive and move away from it to more productive endeavors. But real-time coaching, I think, is essential. And the challenge is, the higher you rise in organizational life, the less honest, candid feedback you get. And that's a challenge, because senior leaders become insulated and they begin to believe their own press. And that's very, very dangerous when you don't have people who are challenging you, people that you're regularly asking to give you honest, unedited feedback on what they see. And the first thing we have to do is, we call it the growth spiral in our language. The growth spiral is whenever you get into a situation where we call it a clutch situation. Now, think about the clutch on your car. The purpose of the clutch, when it's engaged, it creates traction to build momentum. The gears engage to take the power from the transmission to the drivetrain, eventually to the axle, which turns the wheels, which gains traction momentum. A clutch situation is anytime you encounter someone with whom you need to deeply connect to make progress. So that can be any coaching conversation. Let's just take it that way. When you engage in a coaching conversation, you begin to receive information. You have an opportunity either to ascend what we call the growth spiral, or descend the growth spiral. When you descend the growth spiral, you immediately become reactionary. You become defensive to the feedback that you receive. You begin to rationalize and justify your activity rather than listening intently to what's being said and trying to process it effectively. And then you begin to slide downward, and you go from rationalization and justification to stagnation, eventually to desperation and alienation, which is the way you don't want to go. But that happens all too often when people receive feedback, because they've never had the coaching to help them engage with what we would describe as emotional intelligence to be able to respond appropriately. The first thing you have to do when you receive feedback is you have to honestly assess it. And by that, you have to remain curious, suspend your judgment, and ask questions. Ask deep exploratory questions. Well, why did you feel that way, Stacy? What exactly was it that I did that caused you to think that? Would you unpack that a little bit for me? Just help me better understand the dynamics. What were the repercussions that you saw? How can I be better? So you ask a lot of exploratory questions to unpack that, to gather more information that then you can process. And then you move to a stage, and this is a critical stage, is that once you go through honest evaluation, you begin to close the gap by asking them to partner with you, to be your coach, to watch your back, to help you grow. So you begin to not alienate, but you begin to provide unity. You pull together and you say, hey, if I start moving down that road again, will you just nudge me, wink at me, do it, slap me, kick me under the table, whatever is necessary to help prevent me from pursuing that negative path again. And what happens is then even your worst critic now becomes your coach, and you've drawn them to your side because you asked them to help you grow, and they brought it to your attention. So what are they going to say? Well, no, I'm not going to help you grow. No, they're probably going to step into it and they're going to say, well, sure, I'll be happy to have your back on that issue. So you draw them to your side, which is inspirational. It creates unity because you now come together emotionally to address the issue rather than attacking the person. And I think sometimes we take feedback, it feels like an attack, but that's an emotional reaction that we have to have maturity and the emotional intelligence to say, even if this is coming to me in a way that's probably not the best because it's not packaged well, it's not being delivered well, we still have to have the fortitude and the wherewithal to say, it's not about the delivery, it's about the message. What in the message can I find to be helpful? And again, your worst critic can become your best coach. Some people that I know have been upset with me, have fired at me, have brought critical comments to me. When I sit back and reflect on, okay, what's the genesis of that? There's probably a kernel of truth there. Something I need to look at. Was the presentation right? No. Was it aggressive? Yes. But was it helpful? It can be, if I have the emotional intelligence to sit back and go, wow, I need to think about that. I'm going to process that. Let me dwell on that for a little while and let me pull out that nugget of truth, that nugget of gold that can help me improve as a leader. And I think that's what we have to do if we want to grow and move forward.
I'm a practitioner in emotional intelligence, so I do a lot of work with my clients that way too. And when we talk about self-awareness, that is one of the pillars that we do talk about with that. So you hit that right on the head. And you're right, our first reaction is, ugh, this doesn't feel good. How dare they? But the reality is, when people are giving you that honest feedback, it is because they care. It's the people that do want you to get better give you that feedback. Great points. And thank you for those great questions for people to think about as they go through that, to not get defensive. How can you draw that out of it? Even when people are upset or angry with you, they might even be really rude when they're giving you that feedback, but there is always that nugget that you can pull out of it because there's a reason that they're that way.
Those that are closest to us sometimes give us feedback unsolicited or in ways that are hard for us to understand or embrace. Our spouses are great at being able to hold up a mirror and reflect back to us, right? My wife recently gave me a card and said, I hope you get better soon. And that would have been sweet, except for the fact that I wasn't sick. She just was hoping I would actually get better soon. so, yeah. So we all need to think about, how can we get better soon at what we do? And it's good to have people in our world who will prod us and nudge us in that direction.
All right, there's that sound. It's time for our fun questions. Are you ready for the fun questions?
Fire away.
First question is, if you were an animal, what would you be and why?
Okay. If I were an animal, what would I be and why? I would be a gazelle because they are sleek, they're fast, they're elegant, they're sure-footed, they're all those things that I am not. Okay. So I would say a gazelle, because if you've ever seen a gazelle running across the mountains, it's a breathtaking sight.
I love that. I definitely would have never guessed you saying that one. So I love that one. All right, next question. If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Oh, that's easy. I'm playing right now with some digital technology, AI, to create my own digital twin avatar so that we can take our content globally. So I would definitely say that if I could be an expert in anything, I would want to be a linguist, someone who masters all languages, because I think the power to be able to communicate universally would be extraordinary to have. And I would love to master every language on the planet. Through our digital content and AI, we can do that now. We can offer it in 53 different languages around the globe. I watched the other day this digital avatar as I'm speaking in all these various languages, and I was just cracking up because there's no way in the world I'd ever be able to do that were it not for technology. I think it's a great opportunity to impact the world with the message. So I would want to be a linguist.
Love that. Great topics today. Thank you so much for your insight. I love the axiology. I love giving hope, making sure we have emotional intelligence, and talking about feedback and understanding how to improve on that feedback, the questions to ask ourselves with the 4 pillars in the axiology as well. And I believe that you might have another book coming out soon. Would you like to tell our audience about that?
I would love to, and thank you for the opportunity. Actually, we have 2 books coming out this spring. Our book that we wrote back in 2014, the 3rd edition, is coming out in April. It's entitled Remarkable, and it's a leadership parable that talks about culture and engagement and customer service. Really excited about the new edition. It'll be out in April, but you can get it wherever fine books are sold, whether that's Barnes & Noble or Amazon or BAM, you can get it everywhere. And then in August, I have a new book coming out that's very much about what we've been talking about, called Make Life Good. The full title is You've Made a Good Living. Now make life good. And it's about giving. It's about philanthropy. It's about changing the world through acts of kindness that I think a lot of people will enjoy. Remarkable in April, and then Make Life Good in August. But you can also find our books on our website at drrandyross.com too. Just drrandyross.com. Or if they're looking for a speaking engagement or a leadership event, I'd be happy to talk with them about that as well.
Wonderful. Anywhere else for people to get a hold of you?
You can find me drrandyross.com on LinkedIn or Facebook, all the social media platforms. We try to get some content out there to encourage people and inspire people along the way. You can connect with me any way you'd like. Probably the best way directly is either LinkedIn or our website.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Randy. I think you gave our listeners a lot of great things for them to think about and take away after our conversation today. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Stacy, and all the best to you in your endeavors.
Thank you. And that concludes another episode of Leadership Moments. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights in what we shared today. Remember, leadership is not defined solely by titles or positions, but by the choices we make and the moments that shape us.
Embrace the challenges that come your way. They may be the very moments that propel you toward greatness. We'd love to hear your thoughts and stories as well. Connect with us on our website at leadershipmomentspodcast.com or through social media on Instagram at tap_be-the-game-changer.
And Stacy Castor _. Remember, your leadership moment could be just around the corner waiting for you to seize it. This is Stacy Castor, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
This is Tracy Ann Palmer, and be the change you wish to see in the world.